Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. Today I will be reviewing and analysing the 2022 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, round 8 of the 2022 Formula 1 World Championship. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix is a favourite on the calendar among many, as the Baku city circuit presents the contrast of a tight, twisty street circuit with an over 2 kilometre back straight that has seen 4 abreast in the past. Just ask Daniel Ricciardo after his triple overtake down there at turn 1 in 2017. However, Formula 1 has received a lot of criticism for continuing to run the Grand Prix, as the Azerbaijani government has often been accused of human rights abuses, and with this knowledge, many claim that this Grand Prix is sports washing. Nevertheless, F1 has raced in Azerbaijan since 2016, its inaugural appearance under the name of the European Grand Prix, to this date the 23rd and final Grand Prix under that name in the sport. After 2016, Azerbaijan was granted the right to have an official Grand Prix. If only they could pay back the favour to their own citizens. Anyway, racing in Azerbaijan has seen a different winner every single time, with Rosberg, Ricciardo, Hamilton, Bottas and Perez all with a Grand Prix victory here. 4 of 5 having the ability to make it to this weekend. You can listen to the podcast on a variety of streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts, all of which are linked below. And if you're listening via YouTube, feel free to comment any suggestions for what else you would like to hear from me down below. Now, without further ado, let's get into episode 60. Let's start with the practice and pre-qualifying roundup. And let's begin with Sergio Perez, who is somewhat of a Baku connoisseur, having taken a podium on all but one visit to the Baku circuit, the famous 2018 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which saw 2 key teammate scuffles, that of Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, which saw both crash out at turn 1, which was part of the reason why Daniel decided to leave Red Bull, as well as Force India teammates Ocon and Perez coming to blows, which saw the latter retire. Checo needed to capitalise on his initial form from last weekend and ride off the high of that Monaco Grand Prix victory, as he was, prior to the race, only 15 points behind championship leader Verstappen. And Checo came out of the blocks hot this weekend, taking the fastest time in both FP1 and FP3, despite going off the road multiple times at turn 1 and turn 15. He needed to make a statement to teammate Verstappen, who was in third in every single practice session, that his title fight should be taken seriously, and this is the optimum circuit for him to prove it. Next, let's talk about a pair of drivers who have been struggling all season, Mick Schumacher and Nicholas Latifi. The pair of them have crashed nearly into the double figures combined this season, with Mick Schumacher's horror shunt at the swimming pool chicane last time out in Monaco was the breaking point for team principal of Haas, Gunther Steiner, who said afterwards that it is not possible to continue like this. This may be a mere remark which will incite Mick into getting himself in order, but it could just as easily be interpreted as a threat. Mick has been thoroughly outperformed by teammate Kevin Magnussen all season long, especially in qualifying. And in the races, despite Mick often finding himself in the points, such as in Miami, he often throws away the opportunity, often through a silly mistake, which denied him his first points position in the sport in the US after he dive-bombed Sebastian Vettel into turn 1, sending both of them out of the Grand Prix. It's been a rough few years for the Haas outfit, whose sponsor choice has been abhorrent, but Mick is slowly becoming part of the problem, and he needed to alleviate his mistakes in Baku. On to Latifi, and he too is under pressure from his teammate to get his stuff together. Nick de Vries has been testing semi-constantly for Williams as of late, and it is clear that if Nicholas does not change, no sponsorship money can save him. Finally, for the practice roundup, and porpoising has come back into the picture in Baku, and was especially potent on the insubordinately long start-finish straight. Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton both suffering from it significantly in FP1, reopening old wounds for the Mercedes camp, who had thought that this was behind them, having alleviated those issues in Spain. Will the porpoising hinder Mercedes' performance in qualifying? Listen to find out. The Red Bulls were on top in Q1, with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz following just over a tenth behind. After a relatively quiet Q1, Lance Stroll tapped the barriers at turn 7 before crunching into the wall on the exit of turn 2, putting an end to his qualifying and leading to a wild jostle for position in the final 2 minutes, with the McLaren and Haas drivers almost not making the line in time to complete their final flyers. This scuffle compromising their flying laps as they were battling down the straight. Q1 saw both Haas cars, both Williams cars, and the unfortunate Lance Stroll bow out. Kevin Magnussen never having made Q3 in Azerbaijan. In Q2, despite Leclerc and Sainz having led the standings early on, Sergio Perez would take the fastest time, whilst Lewis Hamilton, who took 6th in Q2, came under investigation for driving too slowly. Both McLarens, both Alfa Romeos, and Esteban Ocon would not make it to Q3. As the sun set over Baku, Charles Leclerc set the fastest time of the day, claiming his second pole position in a row at Baku, in front of 2021 race winner Sergio Perez, who stayed in the pits a while longer than usual as the Red Bull team reached the optimum setup. Max Verstappen was in third, followed by Carlos Sainz, whose pole attempts were scuppered by a touch against the barriers at turn 2, nearly repeating Lance Stroll's mistake from Q2. George Russell would take his second top 5 grid position this season in a bid to keep the run of top 5 finishes in races flowing. Mr. Consistent, a real title for him at this point. He was in front of AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly, that P6 his best grid position of the season so far. Hamilton would follow, with Yuki Tsunoda in 8th, and Sebastian Vettel would take 9th in his second Q3 appearance of the season, 2 more top 10s in qualifying than his teammates. Finally, rounding out the top 10 was Fernando Alonso. For my driver of qualifying, it's Pierre Gasly. This season so far for him has been a severe decrease in form from his phenomenal 2020 and 2021 seasons, in which he achieved 2 podiums and numerous top 5 finishes, as well as boasting an average grid position of 6.3, and beating his teammate in qualifying 21 times out of 22. This year, however, it has not been such smooth sailing at all, with the Frenchman not having scored any points since Australia, being down 5 points on his teammate in the championship, and having been out-qualified by Yuki 3 times out of 7. This top 6, however, will be a huge confidence boost for Gasly, after the unfortunate news that Checo had signed on until 2024 with Red Bull. Now for my team of qualifying, and this has to go to AlphaTauri. It's been a difficult year for the Italian team, with only 17 points to their name before Baku, 23 behind their closest rival ahead, Alpine. But a double Q3 qualifying, only their second on the year, will surely lead to much needed points. Finally, for my struggle of the day, and it's Valtteri Bottas. The Finn only just about made it through to Q2 and was 7/10 off the pace in the second part of qualifying, his form in qualifying having evaporated as of late, with 2 consecutive races in which he has not made Q3 after a great start to the season. He now has his work cut out for him, coming from P15th on the grid if he wants to gain any more points this weekend. Now onto the race, and it was Max Verstappen who took the race victory, with teammate Sergio Perez 20 seconds down the road in second. The team's second 1-2 of the season. That's a mouthful. Sergio Perez had a good start, going down the inside of Charles Leclerc into turn 1, the Monegasque locking up. But a slow stop from Checo, which lasted over 5 seconds, and Max came back into contention. Leclerc led after the Red Bulls pitted, but he suffered his second engine failure from the lead this season, and is now 34 points behind his Dutch rival in the championship, with Perez's P2 putting him only 21 points adrift. Now in second in the Drivers' Championship as well. But Leclerc was only one of 4 Ferrari-powered cars to retire in the Grand Prix, as Carlos Sainz suffered a hydraulics issue on lap 9, Zhou Guanyu retired from the points on lap 24 with a technical issue, and Kevin Magnussen retired for the second weekend in a row, also with an engine issue, on lap 33. With no points and 2/3 of their powered cars retiring, Ferrari are in desperate need of a good weekend. The start to the season looked so promising for them, with 2 victories in the first 3 races, but they have been winless from there and are now 80 points behind Red Bull in the championship. If they want to mount a title challenge this year, they need to change things up, and very swiftly indeed. George Russell rounded out the podium, still having finished in the top 5 at every race so far this season. The Brit's start to the season has been absolutely mesmerising, and it is clear that he is not fazed whatsoever by stepping up to Mercedes. He is now only 17 points behind Charles Leclerc as well, and could well challenge for that P3 spot, or even better, if Ferrari's woes continue. His teammate Lewis Hamilton followed, with his second top 4 finish in a row, recovering after being overtaken in the stops by Sebastian Vettel, who managed to recover to 6th after going on at turn 3, having overtaken Esteban Ocon, falling to 12th, but ending up with 8 points in the bag, nearly tripling his tally on the year, moving him past Yuki Tsunoda in the Drivers' Championship. The pair was split by Pierre Gasly, who converted his positive qualifying into a very positive top 5 finish, again his first this year. Fernando Alonso managed to hold off both McLarens for 7th, the papaya pair engaging in intense verbal warfare with the team. Lando Norris very unhappy that he wasn't unleashed upon Fernando Alonso in the closing stages, and Ricciardo fuming that Lando was let by him in the early stages. Norris clearly now feels that he should be in the leadership role, after Ricciardo has proven to be struggling at his relatively new team, and this tension between the two, which has been bubbling under the surface for quite some time. Remember last year when Lando Norris said that if he had concerns, he wasn't required to be empathetic about them. And this tension is beginning to come to light, as Lando nearly defied team orders in the final lap, but didn't quite have the pace to overtake Ricciardo. Rounding out the top 10 was Esteban Ocon, followed by Bottas and Albon. Yuki Tsunoda was in P13 after a bizarre incident in which his DRS flap broke in 2 and only half of it had the ability to operate. He was shown the black and orange flag, which let him come into the box to repair the flap, but he was sent back out onto the racetrack with the system merely taped together. The FIA infuriated by this and almost giving him the black flag. I would not be surprised if a fine was the result of this, as this could have led to the system flying off and hitting another car or even driver. Remember Felipe Massa being knocked out by a screw that fell off, I believe it was Jenson Button's brawn in 2009. Anyway, Schumacher and Latifi were the last of the finishers, the Canadian having succumbed to a number of